Good morning, it's Brian here. You are on the Art of Startup War, where myself, as the CEO and founder of Expert Dojo, sit with phenomenal entrepreneurs. Many of the entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs that we've invested in for one reason or another. Some of the entrepreneurs, and only some, do we bring in from the outside because we are so unbelievably impressed with what they're building that we want to find out more about the company and we want to dig in a little bit deeper. I would say I haven't chosen a new company in, I don't know, this year. Maybe. It's been a long time since I brought somebody in, but I absolutely love this company. I love the founder's message. I love what they're actually building. I love the reason why they're building it. I love the communities that they're serving. I love that this has the ability to actually drive revenue, so it becomes a really strong company that's able to do good in the world. And I also really like the folks, the celebrity folks that they're bringing in around them to see if they can raise that awareness and just get a better ROI. So today, we're going to speak with Wear Your Voice, and Wear Your Voice, I've got Ravneet and I've got Sennai. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
You got it. And look, so this show, I say show, the only people who are listening to this, whatever I call this, are investors who are thinking, I want to see if I can find a company which is coming through the Dojo Accelerator or coming through Brian, because I, being the investor, know that Brian and Expert Dojo search all around the world to try and find the best companies on the planet and then bring them in. And during this segment, it's not a pitch deck. It's not I'm going to give you 12 slides on why my company's best. It's a really nice casual conversation about where your business is going. And it just gives investors a great feel as to you, the reasons why you're doing what you're doing, and where you're going to as a company. So it really gives them that great investment base going forward. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to talk about. So let's kick it off at the start. And I want to go right back to the beginning. And maybe this is you, Ravneet, but I'd like to know what possessed you to do this. Like, what was it that woke you up in the morning and made you decide to work 19-hour days every single day for no thanks and no pay, and then build up this community of people that you one day realized was special? But before we get to the special piece, I want to understand your why.
Boredom. No, I'm joking.
Just life was too easy?
Yeah, it's too easy. I was like, oh, what else can I do with my time? Wear Your Voice is very much based off my own personal experience and my story. I'm a South Asian woman, and as you can hear, I'm from the UK as well. And I always felt like mainstream media didn't include me as part of the conversation. And what I mean by that is by way of imagery, the dialogue, the representation, my culture. So I grew up in this world where there was no internet. Yes, I'm now telling you my age. But there wasn't a lot for me to there wasn't a lot for me to grasp onto. It wasn't happening in schools. It wasn't happening definitely in my family. We're very Indian. It's very patriarchal. Not very modern way of thinking or looking at life. My trajectory felt very like get an education, get married, be trophy wife, have children. And it didn't feel like it was anything more than that, but I knew I was more than that.
Yeah.
So fast forward many years later, and I realized that mainstream media still wasn't including me in the conversation. But not only was it not including me, it wasn't including a whole host of other people too. And it's at that point that frustration led into action. And I decided I'd launch my own online magazine and really show mainstream media who the conversation should be centered around, what conversations can be had, and how we can uplift marginalized communities of color, LGBTQIA communities, and really give them a seat at the table, because definitely we weren't invited to the table, so we had to make our own table and make our seat and sit at it. So that's what drove me to this point.
Really powerful. And, it's funny. I don't really even see you as a magazine. I see you more of a community, because it's a two-way dialogue. And what you did was you created a place where folks can come to relate with each other and to have a discussion about what they're relating with, and also have a discussion about what they're not relating with, rather than just everybody fitting into that very narrow demographic, which is shoved down everybody's throat. from right from the very beginning. But and how do you go? So it's a beautiful ideology, right? To speak to people who are not being spoken to, and to say we want to we want to be inclusive of all of your views, and we want to create a platform for those views to be discussed and for them to be amplified. But so one thing is thinking about that, and another thing is creating it, and creating it is not easy. So
No,
how
it's
did you do that?
um, it really it really was intention, setting integrity and intention around what I wanted to achieve, and not so much looking at what it would be like in 20 years, but focusing on the now. So I launched with the idea of liberation of women, which is very loosey goosey. We're a feminist publication, again a little bit loosey goosey, and as we grew, I started to listen more and more into the what was happening on the day to day and how we could respond accordingly, and also listen to our audience and what they wanted to see more of, and then also look at who our audience was and build off of that. And we are an entirely women of color founding team. All our team members of our team are women of color, people of color, and a majority fall in the LGBTQIA community. And the beauty of that, and I think that's how we've been so successful, is that we are the audience we're speaking to.
Right.
So we don't have to wonder or guess or ruminate on how we attract and talk to our community, because we are them. So we have been so successful at building this community, and it's all happened organically. Like, we have an easy 100K plus on Instagram, and that's doubled in the last 6 months due to everything that's been happening, purely out of sound messaging, having integrity in this space, and being a part of our audience, not so much tokenizing them, because that happens a lot in mainstream media. And when I say we, our audience, my team, we felt that mainstream media was either talking about us or at us, but they weren't including us to tell our own dialogue. So I wanted to personalize that narrative, and I started to gather freelance writers, gather team, and we started to do a slow build. And that I had no intention of rushing to the finish line. You cannot build community fast. It takes something, and it takes
Mm-hmm.
you to really understand, listen, and sometimes just be quiet and sit back and observe. And I did a lot of that. It's been 6 years in the making. For the first 5 years, I bootstrapped it myself until 2019. We attracted the attention of Mark Cuban, and then he jumped on as our first investor.
And Sinai, where did you fit in here? And how and why did this appeal to you? And did you come on before the Mark Cuban moment or after the Mark Cuban moment?
Yeah, so I came on post Mark Cuban, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why I came on is I spent the last almost 13 years of my life at ESPN, Beats by Dre, Apple, and Nike. Strong brands, very
Very strong.
authentic and massive communities. And one of the things that really attracted me to this opportunity was the authenticity that Ravneet and the team had built. One of the trends that I saw over the last 5 years or so across both across Beats, Apple, and Nike, is this proliferation of micro communities. And what I mean by that is that I think way back when digital platforms became these massive ad or revenue generating opportunities from an ad perspective. Folks were just looking for impressions. Folks were just looking for big looks. But what's happened over the last few years is because there's so many, this idea of authenticity and real stories, real people, relatability has really risen to the top of what brands want to see and want to partner with. And so I had a relationship with Mark and his team, and him and his team told me a little bit about what Ravneet was doing. And from the second I met Ravneet and heard her story, from the second I was able to spend some time on the platform. And to your point, it's so much more than a digital platform. It truly is a community. I mean, the IPs that we've created go far and wide beyond just a digital platform. It truly is everything from in real life to podcasts to content creation, and so much more that allows you to really dive into this community of folks that you cannot touch unless you have the authentic elements connected to their story and who they are, because it's such a guarded community. And this is not a small community either, right? This is a massively growing community that
Well,
generates,
it's kind of everybody, right? It's so
yeah,
funny. It's so funny. But like we look at minorities in a way. We invested in an Indian company about 2 months ago. And we've invested in actually 3 Indian companies in the last 2 months. But we invested in one Indian company, and I had him on the podcast earlier on. And they're doing an influencer platform towards Indians everywhere. And I said, oh, how many Indians, not how many Indians are in India, right? Because there's a bunch, but like, how many Indians are there in the world? He's going, oh, well, it's like 1 in 7 people. I'm like, well, that's not really a minority. That's kind
Yeah.
of everyone. It's just, what's so crazy about this is each one of the groups that you're speaking about is treated as an extreme minority by its exclusion, but the actual size of the groups together is bigger than anything, or even many of the groups on their own is bigger than anything that exists even alongside those groups. So I just find it really fascinating. The other point about, I really like what Ravneet was saying just about women empowerment. And I know we all struggle for the words of like, what's the best way of doing it, empowering women or helping women be, or all that kind of stuff. I just think women are a lot better than the circumstances that they're generally shoved into just everywhere, right? It's just that simple. And when we look at entrepreneurs and we look at people to invest in, and you know, long before we already invest in minorities anyway. We have done. We actually looked at our current cohort. We have company from Egypt, company from Israel, company from India, company from Japan, lady from Japan. We got another lady from Spain. We got Africa, 2 from Africa. So for us, like, we get it. We already got that a while ago. This is not a charity. These people are better than the other folks who are not them because the circumstances have molded them in a way that they're just better. It's that simple. And so even though I really, really struggle to find female entrepreneurs on the level that we find male entrepreneurs, for whatever the reason being, I always know when we get a female entrepreneur, if I line up the female entrepreneurs in our cohort against males, without wanting to say the wrong thing here, I know for pretty much 100% fact that statistically my female entrepreneurs will be more successful with their company endeavors than my male entrepreneurs. So what you're doing is to be championed without any question, because it's just important. And it's important not to make people feel good and not just to say nice things about folks who happen to have difficult situations. It's important to allow people to be what they need to be able to become. So I think from that side of it, even when the 3 of us first spoke, I really liked it. I loved the idea of what you were building. I love the idea of the community. I love the idea of why you were building the community. I find we're going to get in a couple of minutes to the revenue and where we're going to go in the revenue in the future. And we're going to talk about the raise, and we're going to talk about investors, and we're going to talk about Mark Cuban. I want to just touch before then, though, how you added the different groups, because you started off for women in color. I think it was, women in color. And then you kind of added on the other groups as well. Can you maybe speak to how that feeling of inclusiveness of everything overtook maybe the feeling of unfairness or silliness with one specific area?
I can speak to that. So really, on so many levels, yes, I present as a woman of color, but we are also, so many of us are non-binary, trans, we're queer, we're, bisexual, whatever we are, we're the fact is we're not just women anymore. We're not just men anymore, and we're certainly women of color, but we don't just fit into one category anymore. So when you look at this publication, if we were to only focus on women of color, we have left out the entire LGBTQIA community potentially, and that is that opens up a whole new dynamic for us and a whole new opportunity for us from a brand partnership perspective, from a content perspective. And the fact is that also talking to the LGBTQIA community has to really come from those who are part of the community in order to understand the dialogue, in order to understand how to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That makes total sense. And
yeah,
actually, as you look at the name and you're really speaking to the people who don't really have a huge voice. And then
yes,
you're becoming their voice, which is why it's actually such a beautiful name. And then
yeah.
so you built it over those 6 years, and those 6 years has got to have been a slog. Look, I've built up companies. There are 2 paths. Like I think we talked about this before. There's like the venture backable plan, and then there's the I'll build it myself plan, and they converge. But if you raise money at the beginning, then that building a startup, it's hard, but it's not as hard with $1 million in the bank, right? When
Yeah.
you go down the other path of I am going to somehow find interns all day long, and I'm going to find people who care, and I'm going to find volunteers, and I'm going to do all the things that are literally back-breaking. It's the equivalent to digging a ditch every single day for
Yep.
your life. And you choose that path. It's very, very brave path to go down, especially when it's in service of other people. So talk to
Yeah.
us a little bit about maybe the difficulties that were faced on that journey.
Yeah, it was because I personally self-funded. I had funds to work with. I just needed to use them and execute in a very pragmatic and very smart, economical way. Um, so, as far as finding interns, bring all their other things with them. What I was looking for was like semi-professionals in the space, people who understood the space, at least people who understood what we were trying to achieve,
Hmm.
even if they weren't official journalists. Right now, our freelance writers are very talented and come with a plethora of accolades. But back in the day, we would literally take you if you could write something. And if you could write something and I liked it, I was going to pay for it. So I wanted to, I don't believe in, I believe if we are going to bring marginalized communities of color up, we have to provide them with economic access. And the mainstream media space has for too long asked people to do work for the exposure.
Hmm.
Except that exposure doesn't actually pay bills. And when
No.
you're asking marginalized communities of color to do something for exposure, you're leaving them in an economic situation which is not beneficial to them. So actually, it's counterproductive, counterintuitive to why this company exists. What I was doing was intentionally creating a conscious company. And if I couldn't pay for the piece of content, I wasn't going to ask you to write it. It was as simple as that. And I created this intentional, conscious media company so that I could call other mainstream media companies into action and show them that it is possible to create content, to add value to someone's life by paying them for the time they have expended on creating the content that you are now going to monetize. I just didn't like the model that media was built on, and I knew that we had to do something very, very differently and very intentional. And yes, it did. It was very, very hard. It has been nothing but a difficult struggle to the top. And even then, we sort of still managing on very tight budgets. Like we were referred to recently by one of our investors as, "I'm tired of seeing you be hand to mouth. It's about time that Where Your Voice got the support they need." But I knew that as a brown woman walking to a VC's office with an idea, it wasn't going to cut it. I
Yeah.
have to, if people always say, "What's your revenue model? What were you doing in the early days?" The revenue is the people that we have.
Hmm.
Those people can now be made into some sort of revenue. But if they don't exist on our platform, if they're not reading our content, they're not engaging on our social media, then I'm not really selling anything apart from an idea.
Yeah.
And so I took it upon myself. Because I wasn't going to have anyone shoot down the idea that I would be able to build this and take some time to do a slow build and then take it to an investor and say, "This is what I've built on X amount of dollars, and this is what's possible with the right sort of investment."
Yeah, phenomenal. And it is a tremendously difficult journey to go through. And then, so you broke through, you got through that 5 years, which is to be commended. I've done early stage startups myself. I obviously we're surrounded by early stage startups every single day of the week, and the small amount of money that we pass on to people, they make the journey a tiny bit easier, but it pretty soon gets back to where it was before. So I really, really feel your journey, and I think it's wonderful. But then you broke through and you managed to get Mark Cuban. Was Mark Cuban the first major investor, or did you have other ones? And maybe speak a little bit to why he invested.
Mark Cuban was our first main investor,
Wow.
and that was in January 2019. And why he invested? He's definitely not a part of the community we directly serve, and I will talk
Hmm.
about that in a minute because um, well, actually, I'll talk about it now because it's not that Where Your Voice is just for marginalized communities of color, LGBTQIA. It is for everybody. So
Hmm.
if you're coming to Where Your Voice, you're coming for an education. If you're part of the community, you're coming because you feel seen and heard. Again, if you're part of the community or you want the education, it's a safe space. You really don't have to advertise when you're on Where Your Voice. You can pop onto Where Your Voice, read something that inspires you, gives you that education, gives you that grounding that you need, and put it into action in your own personal world and beyond. For Mark, he saw the intention behind the publication, and he saw the communities we were serving, and he realized how incredibly important these communities are.
Yeah.
Not even just from a revenue standpoint, from a perspective of they need a seat at the table too. And for all too long, it's been dominated by only one type of person. So he jumped on board with the idea that he could help impact that change by purely from a financial standpoint, and then
Amazing.
from his personal expertise, and adding guidance and giving us, several advisors to link up with, to lean on, to ruminate with, to troubleshoot ideas with. I mean, I had a lot of hand holding in the first year with the advisor that he gave me. and
Fantastic.
and at that point Sinai walks in, but it was full on, but it was never, I never felt that I was being um, judged or tricked or tested. It really felt like it was coming from a supportive space. He just wanted to help me add value, and he knew that it's just. And when he came on board, by the way, we were. It was only me and two people in editorial. So we were running the entire show, and I'm talking from social media to sourcing content to editing to publishing to building visibility to networking. It was literally just three of us, and really the only person who could really network was me. And I also have two kids, so it was really it. I really felt that as much as he pushed me and challenged me, he also, held space for me to be successful and believes in what we're doing.
Absolutely fantastic. And such a great testament to him as well that he would step in and actually do that. Because giving the money is one thing. As you said, the advising, the help, the support, all of those things are phenomenal too. And then I imagine things have just got better and better for you since then, right? Because the everything that's happened with Black Lives Matter has to have had a very positive impact. It has to have shined a light on what you're doing and all of it. I mean, look, everybody knows. Look, I'm cynical and I'm old, and what happened with Rodney King was equally terrible, and people spoke about it and they shouted about it, and everybody said we're going to support, and then that support waned after a period of time and then went away, and so it continues down the chain, right? So
Yeah.
I truly believe you can only really do something with these things starting with the self, but I would imagine it really helped, right?
I mean, it it was tragic. It is tragic. It's never stopped being tragic. I think the thing that distinguishes Wear Your Voice from other mainstream media noise is the fact that we've been a part of this conversation from almost day
Yeah,
dot.
yeah,
We didn't jump on it because it was trendy or
yeah.
it was lucrative or whatever it was, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't a passing phase. It wasn't a diversity inclusion initiative. It was literally because there was a problem that needed to be solved, and I wanted to be a part of solving that problem and leverage the privilege that I hold in this space, because I've been in front of people and in rooms where women of color, particularly Black women, can never get into. So I leverage my privilege 24/7 to get that sort of visibility. And yes, it has been phenomenal. The last 6 months for us, when COVID hit, I thought, oh my goodness, now yet more chaos. But then everything that happened in the news um, fed right into our work. And that's when our social media started getting a huge uptick. Our views were like crazy. And the donations coming our way were phenomenal. People just kept, sort of, for lack of a better word, throwing money at us. And,
Yeah.
we've had like, I've had people, the Daily Mail staff donated over $10,000 to us just on a whim. I had a PR company recently reach out, like, can we have your wire instructions? We want to donate. Um, People jumped on our Patreon, they jumped onto our PayPal, our Venmo, and they have
Fantastic.
literally. Luckily for us, and luckily because I have Sinai on board, this is very much his area of expertise, but we've also secured a brand partnership in the middle of COVID, which I didn't even envisage. Who knew? So at this point it's clear, and the fact that we still exist now. Been through tough times. 2018 was ugly. I mean, I just didn't have any more money. It was as simple as that. And when we put a message out on our social media, which was half at this point, if not quarter of what it is now, our social media following our audience saved us. They sent enough money to Wear Your Voice that we could keep the bills being paid and keep my team on board.
Because you supported them first.
Yes.
Because you were
And
there first. And I think that your point is massively valid. Like, first of all, your point about the thank yous. My dad, God rest his soul, he used to say to me, whenever I would ask him for something for free, he would say to me, look, the day that they accept a thank you in repayment for the pint of Guinness that I want to buy in the bar, then your thank you will be valuable to me. In the meantime, I'll take cash, you know. So I think the fact that you at the very beginning were really intentional about making sure that you took care of your community is a really big thing. And
Yeah.
my second, I'm going to throw out cheesy phrases of the day. My second cheesy phrase of the day is a Gary Player one, which is, you know, the harder I practice, the luckier I get. So I don't think there were any random donations from anybody or anybody randomly coming in. I just think that you supported your community in such a hardcore way for such a long period of time that you suddenly realize this is what it means to have community. Community is not a social media reach. It's not the amount of email addresses that you have or the amount of people that you can connect for a thing. It's how your people interact with you when the chips are down on
Yeah.
both sides of the
Yeah.
table, right? And that speaks thoroughly to how much you have been all in on actually building it for them. So, you know, I see when I look at the community that you represent, obviously there is the potential for tens of millions of people to be actively engaged with this. Again, I want to look at how do we grow those people, or what does that look like as you go forward? You got Mark Cuban in, you did it, like you hit your big investor. It doesn't get any bigger than Mark. Now you kind of go to the stage of bringing in other investors in on the back of that, and then growing up your reach until you get to a stage where you can start to bring in the institutional investors in on the back of that as well. I do feel you're very, very close for all of those things. But let's talk a little bit about what that plan looks like. And this is specifically for the investors who are listening to the show, who are thinking, you know, if we want to invest in this company in the future, where do we invest? Do we do a straight note with them? And also, what's going to happen with the company? How do we know that they're going to continue on growing to an extent that either the company can IPO in the future, or you can get acquired by the right acquirer, or just that you get to a good result for the investors?
Yeah, so what's great about, kind of what we've been talking about is the years of work behind the scenes, right? And that's what builds authenticity, and that's what differentiates us versus anyone else in this space. Not because, again, we're doing it for any other reason than to be real and to be honest with our community. And to your point around, what we've experienced for the last 6 months, this conversation that we've been having, we've really been at the crosshairs of purpose and profit. And what I mean by that is we've been having a purpose conversation, uplifting the communities, really telling the stories of that haven't been told, and just starting now. A lot of brands are starting to jump into that space because they see an opportunity to get profit from having those conversations. Whereas we jumped into that space for the simple reason to really service these communities. For us, what growth really looks like is, to Ravneet's point, when Mark jumped on, it was really exciting because he gave us not only the financial support, but a lot of strategic direction. Shortly after Mark, David Edelman also jumped on. David Edelman, from a strategic standpoint, has been an amazing partner, somebody that we could tap into because he's done so much in this space, from a understanding how to build a business, understanding how to essentially create teams. One of the areas of opportunity that Ravneet and I really talked a lot about is building intentionally. And what I mean by that is that in order for us to continue to grow, in order for us to continue to be as dynamic as we can, we need to start to expand our aperture from a creative standpoint. And so we've really been intentional with who we've brought on board. So Nija Kirkendall, if you're not familiar with the name, she is the highest ranking woman of color on the studio side in Hollywood. At Warner Brothers, she's the EVP of Warner Brothers of content creation. The reason we brought Nija on board is because we know in order for us to continue to create content and storytelling at a high level, we need to have somebody with her pedigree that could really help guide us down that path. We also recently brought on Jake Colburn, very similar. He's a very well-known individual in the TV and film space, excuse me, who, again, from a creative standpoint, really has the ability to help us create and generate more IPs. And what I mean by that is, I mentioned this earlier, but we started out as an online magazine, if you will. We quickly grew our social channels and created this massive social ecosystem that exists across multiple social channels, where our footprint is very distinct. We've also done in real life events. In the previous world before COVID happened, we partnered with Complex Con, which is one of the largest youth culture activations in the entire world, where we helped them kick off the week leading up to where they had a new diversity inclusion initiative. And so we were the face of the diversity inclusion initiative. We've recently kicked off podcasts. I mentioned earlier we're creating content to work with Jake as well as Nija to be able to sell into the studios. So we will, again, when the world opens back up, we will look to produce and create our own content that will live both at the digital level as well as the, all the way up to potentially the big screen level, which we're looking at. And all this is happening while we're continuing to storytell from a written perspective. We're creating more video content for our digital platform. And then our big opportunities with brand partners. So to celebrate Pride this past June, we created a content piece with PFLAG, which is the oldest and most recognizable brand within our space, where we had essentially a call and response. And Ravneet can talk a little bit more about the creative, but it was a really passionate, a really purposeful partnership with this brand, because while they're the oldest and largest in our space, what they don't have is they don't have the authenticity that we have from a micro community perspective. They also don't have the connection to youth culture like we have, because we've built with so many young folks within this space. So, Ravneet, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about
Yeah,
that.
sure. I always try to explain to people what a brand partnership with Wear Your Voice looks like when they're not the actual brand, and how it benefits that particular brand. Like, why would they want to partner with Wear Your Voice? And really, I see us as the Michelin star of diversity inclusion initiatives. So if they're wanting to tick certain boxes, we're those boxes. And also, as we mentioned earlier, getting to the level of community, getting to the attention of the communities we have the attention of is really a lot of hard work. You have to really build up trust, because they do not trust easily, because they're so often taken advantage of, and they've started out life in a different way, or
Yeah.
they're working through just existing in the very body they were born in. So when PFLAG jumped on board, they wanted to do a campaign with us. We called it You Are My Pride. And Pride, as we all know, is a moment of celebration for the LGBTQIA community. But for PFLAG, they have a lot of people that actually come out during Pride. And PFLAG as well, they're an organization that really think about the whole picture. So not just are you LGBTQIA, but what is happening at home in the family life, and how can we help educate your family to support you better, and how can we help you come out to your family in the best way that you know how. So for them, Pride in person was having people come up for what they called a PFLAG hug, as they would come out, or they would come back to just reunite with their family. And they wanted to have that same feeling exist through video content, and we help them create that, because there's
Perfect.
something that we do many things well. And that sounds arrogant, but I know we do many things well, but we're great storytellers, but we're great emotional storytellers, and they wanted to grab that emotion. So we tapped into our investors, and we got them to introduce us to their influencer network, and we pulled in some Hollywood influencers to jump on board to do this particular video piece of this video content. And it was called You Are My Pride, and the idea was that then you would see it, and then you might send a message to your pride, etc., and it would go sort of viral on social media, and that was the intention behind that. And that's how we classically have partnered. Even when we partnered with Planned Parenthood, they're doing amazing work, but they're so binary, and we're not anymore. So they partnered with us so that they could get to our audience. And this is exactly why brands jump on board, because they don't know how to talk to our audience,
Yeah.
and
So
they don't
it gives them
and we help.
a direct
Yeah,
impact.
I feel often that I'm a bit of a D&I consultant via brand partnerships, because when the conversation starts, I have to educate them, and then handhold, and then guide them through, and then in the end they just sort of put their hands up, and they're just like, oh, just do it, because we don't trust ourselves to do it right. And they're correct. They're not able to do it because they're not often a part of the community.
And that's where you fit in. Now, I want to, just in the last minute or two, I want to go back to the revenue and what's happening within the funding of the company. Because again,
Sure.
the investors, I think it's very, very clear to anybody listening that you are a media platform. You are a media platform that focuses on a very specific demographic that is looking to dominate in the space that you're in. It just so happens you started with the written word, and that's the one that's showcased first, but it's going to expand way beyond that. As you were talking, I was thinking of even Oprah, and what she's creating, and that's the place to go to. And I think that's what's going to make investors most excited about what you're building. But let's just speak to how much money you're raising, where you're going to be raising it. Let's talk a little bit about how you're going to grow the platform that's going to align for that, where that money is going to be spent, so that we can finish everything with a nice big bang here.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're partnering. We're really excited. We're looking to launch in about a week and a half with WeFunder. So we're
Excellent.
partnering with WeFunder to raise $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And what this $1 million is really going to be focused on is really two areas. One, our brand partnerships and ad sales team. So everything that Ravneet's talked about and everything that Ravneet has done to this point has been amazing from a content creation standpoint. One of the areas of opportunities for us is brand partnerships and ad sales. So being able to build an infrastructure internally that can service the inbound as well as outbound calls and meetings that we need to have with brands to bring on additional brand partners. So typically right now we do about a brand partner a month. And the reason being is both from a capacity standpoint, we just don't have the infrastructure in place, as well as from a creative standpoint, we need to build out that team as well. I mentioned that we're going to be shifting from written content to digital content. That's part of the process that we're currently undergoing. We're going to be able to speed that up substantially with additional resources in-house. I mentioned some of the IPs that we're creating. Obviously, from an investment standpoint, a lot of those resources are going to be put into those IPs so that we can create content at a higher level. And essentially, the more content we create, the more micro communities we can speak to, the faster we can continue to grow, the more brands that we can bring on.
Makes sense.
And as someone who's been in the brand space, like I mentioned, for almost 13 years, I understand the value of a brand like Wear Your Voice and how much sense partnering with the Wear Your Voice makes for any brand that wants to play in the culture space. Because we're talking to a group of folks that represent roughly 32 million Americans. That's 13% of the total population. That's a massive segment, and that's just right today. Right, that's not talking about the advocates.
That's also just Americans. There's a whole big world out there. So look, as I said, you were the first company in this entire year that I've brought up here to showcase and doing a WeFunder campaign, because I believe in your brand, I believe in your product, I believe in Ravneet and why she started this, and I think this is something that people should absolutely get behind. How can folks contact you? Both website and also email address, please.
At wyvmag.com. But really, we're on the website. So if you go to our team page, this might be easier. It's wearyourvoice.com and wearyourvoicemag.com. And if you go to our website, you can actually go to our team page and you'll see my email listed there.
Okay. And then sorry, go on, Sennai.
No, I was going to say, and then we'll be featuring our WeFunder information will be on our website as well.
Yep.
Beautiful. Yeah. Congratulations on everything that you've built. Send this out to all investors. Folks should want to follow. There are lots and lots of angels that are still investing out there. Everybody should be following Mark Cuban's lead. Everybody knows what a smart, intuitive investor that he is. He puts his money into companies that he knows can create great returns. All investors who are listening to this, you're listening to me, looking at this company as a future media magnet platform. This is where diversity is going to look like in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years. So Ravneet, Sennai, thanks for joining us. Good luck and everything on the campaign, and I will continue to be by your side for the entire thing.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much,
Thank
Brian.
you so much.
We appreciate it. Thanks.
That's a wrap.